Listen carefully, for the story that you're about to hear may sound raw to be true, but every line of it is. Before Marcus Chen became one of Silicon Valley's most enigmatic billionaires, he watched his identical twin brother die in his arms on a rain-soaked Seattle street, and inherited a secret that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The woman crying at the funeral, the one whose hand trembled as she placed a single white rose on the casket, had no idea she'd been in love with the wrong brother all along. This is the story of two faces, one fortune, and a deception that began with grief and ended with everything. What you're about to discover isn't just another rags to riches tale. It's the account of a man who built an empire while living in the shadow of a ghost, who fell in love with a woman who thought she knew him, and who made a choice that would either redeem him or destroy everything he'd built. The irony? The humble brother she loved never existed the way she imagined, and the billionaire she would have despised became the man who loved her more than wealth itself. Marcus and Michael Chen entered the world 17 minutes apart on a frigid December morning in 1985 in a cramped apartment above a Chinese restaurant in Queens, New York. Their mother, Lin Chen, a seamstress who worked 16-hour days, used to joke that even God couldn't tell them apart. She was wrong about that. God knew. Marcus knew. And eventually, the difference between them would cost Michael his life. From birth, the twins existed in a strange quantum state, physically identical, but psychologically opposite. Marcus emerged first, screaming and red-faced, fists clenched against the injustice of existence. Michael followed peacefully, eyes wide and curious, as if the world were a gift he couldn't wait to unwrap. Their father, David Chen, a failed restaurant owner who disappeared when the boys were 7, left them with 3 things: a gambling debt, a genetic predisposition for ambition, and the crushing awareness that in America, being invisible meant being poor. Lin worked until her fingers bled to keep them fed. The twins slept in the same bed until they were 12, whispering secrets in the dark, making promises about the futures they'd build. But even then, the divergence was forming. Marcus dreamed of empires. Michael dreamed of gardens. The moment that would define both brothers occurred on Marcus's 14th birthday. Not Michael's 14th birthday, just Marcus's. Because even though they were twins, Marcus had claimed those 17 minutes like a birthright, insisting they celebrate separately. Lin had saved for months to buy them both gifts. For Michael, a second-hand camera, because he loved capturing moments of beauty in their crumbling neighborhood. For Marcus, a biography of Steve Jobs, because he'd mentioned wanting to build something that mattered. But that evening, coming home from the textile factory, Lin was mugged 34 blocks from their apartment. The attacker took her purse, her phone, and the wrapped presents. She arrived home empty-handed, lip bleeding, crying harder about the lost gifts than the violence. Michael held her, whispered that things didn't matter, that she was safe, that they'd celebrate with homemade dumplings like always. Marcus walked out. He didn't return for 2 days. When he did, he had $300 in cash and no explanation. Lin knew better than to ask. Michael suspected, but said nothing. That silence became the first brick in the wall that would eventually separate them. The money came from Marcus's first con, convincing a local pawn shop owner that he was 18, that the vintage watches he'd inherited from his grandfather needed quick sale for rent money. The watches were stolen from unlocked cars in wealthy neighborhoods. Marcus had researched which models would sell fast, which shops didn't ask questions. He bought his mother a new purse. He bought himself the Steve Jobs biography. He didn't buy Michael a camera. "I'll make enough money that this never happens again," Marcus told Lin. "Nobody will ever hurt you because you're poor." Michael, overhearing, felt a chill that had nothing to do with the broken radiator. But what happened next would change everything. At 17, both twins applied to MIT. Both had identical GPAs, 4.0. Both had perfect SAT scores. Both wrote essays about using technology to solve poverty. The admissions committee received 2 applications so similar, they suspected plagiarism. Only one was accepted. Michael. The rejection letter to Marcus cited demonstrated ethical concerns from his high school counselor, who'd noted a pattern of Marcus taking credit for collaborative projects, manipulating group dynamics, and showing concerning interpersonal calculation. Michael's acceptance letter praised his authentic compassion and collaborative spirit. Marcus smiled when he read both letters, congratulated his brother, helped him pack for Cambridge, and began plotting the future that would prove everyone wrong. "You're going to do great things," Marcus said the night before Michael left for MIT. "And I'm going to do greater ones. Different paths, same destination." Michael, who'd spent 17 years reading his brother's micro-expressions, recognized something new in Marcus's eyes that night. Not jealousy, not even rivalry. Calculation. "Marcus," Michael said carefully, "you know we don't have to compete. There's room for both of us to—" "There's never room," Marcus interrupted. "The world pretends there is, but there isn't. Someone wins. Someone loses. I refuse to be the twin who loses because I'm too nice to fight." Michael went to MIT. Marcus went to work. What neither of them knew was that this moment, this divergence, would set in motion a chain of events that would end with Michael's death and Marcus's damnation. The countdown had begun. While Michael studied computer science in Cambridge's hallowed halls, Marcus apprenticed himself to reality. He worked 3 jobs simultaneously: overnight shift at a data entry firm, weekend programming freelance work, and special projects for a venture capitalist named Richard Strauss, who recognized hunger when he saw it. "Your brother got the education," Strauss told Marcus during their first meeting. "You'll get the education that matters. How to make people need what you're selling. How to identify market inefficiencies before they're obvious. How to win when everyone thinks you've lost." Marcus absorbed everything. He learned cap table mechanics. He studied term sheets like scripture. He watched Strauss destroy founders who didn't understand that fundraising was warfare by other means. By 19, Marcus had saved $47,000 and started his first company, a mobile app that connected low-income families with expiring grocery store inventory. The pitch was social good. The reality was data harvesting. He sold the company 8 months later for $1.2 million to a marketing analytics firm. Michael, calling from MIT, was proud. "You're already making a difference." Marcus didn't correct him. Making a difference and making money rarely aligned, and only one paid the bills. But what happened next would test everything Marcus thought he knew about winning. Marcus's second startup failed. His third failed harder. By 22, he'd burned through most of his initial exit money and was living in a $600 a month studio in Newark, subsisting on ramen and ambition. The low point came on a Tuesday in March. Marcus had pitched his 4th company, a B2B SaaS platform for supply chain optimization, to 17 different VCs, 17 rejections. The last one had been particularly brutal. "You're smart," the partner told him, "but you're untrustworthy. Something about you doesn't compute. Founders need to be authentic to inspire loyalty. You feel manufactured." Marcus threw his laptop against the wall that night. It didn't break. Everything else inside him did. He called Michael, who was finishing his PhD in human-computer interaction at Stanford. His brother answered on the first ring. "They think I'm a fraud," Marcus said, voice raw. "You're not a fraud," Michael responded immediately. "You're just playing a character. The ruthless founder. The guy who'll do anything to win. That's not who you actually are." "How do you know who I actually am?" Silence. Then, because you're my twin. I know. But Michael didn't know. Not really. Because Marcus had spent the last 5 years becoming someone even he didn't fully recognize. Someone who saw every relationship as a transaction, every conversation as a negotiation, every kindness as weakness. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Marcus's 5th company emerged from obsession. He'd noticed something during his failures. Every VC firm used different financial models to evaluate startups, but they all suffered from the same data integration nightmare. Founders presented metrics in incompatible formats. Analysts wasted hours standardizing data. Investment decisions slowed. What if there was a platform that auto-converted any startup's metrics into any VC's preferred format? Real-time cap table tracking, scenario modeling, automated due diligence reports. He called it Venture Sync. The first version was terrible. Buggy, crashed constantly. But Marcus had learned something crucial. He needed a technical co-founder who could build what he couldn't. He needed Michael. "I'm finishing my dissertation," Michael said when Marcus pitched him. "I've got job offers from Google, Apple, Facebook. I could start at $250K. "You'd be employee number 47,000, Marcus countered. "Come build something that matters with me, something we own." "I don't want to own things," Michael said quietly. "I want to build things people love. Then build something people love that we own." Michael thought about it for exactly 3 days. Then he moved back to New York, into Marcus's tiny studio, sleeping on an air mattress and writing code 18 hours a day. Within 6 months, Venture Sync had 15 paying customers, small funds that couldn't afford Bloomberg terminals, but needed professional-grade tools. Within a year, Sequoia called. But what they didn't see coming was how success would poison what remained of their brotherhood. The Sequoia partner, Amanda Liu, met with both twins in a Palo Alto conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Sand Hill Road. Marcus wore a suit. Michael wore jeans and a Stanford hoodie. Amanda directed most of her questions to Michael. "Tell me about the architecture, the roadmap, the technical moats." Michael answered with precision and passion, sketching diagrams on the whiteboard, explaining with genuine enthusiasm how they'd solved data normalization challenges that had plagued financial software for decades. Amanda was captivated. When she asked about company culture and vision, Michael spoke about democratizing venture capital, making sophisticated tools accessible to smaller funds, leveling the playing field. Marcus said almost nothing. He simply watched, calculated. At the end, Amanda made an offer. $8 million Series A at a $35 million valuation. Standard terms, 1 board seat. "There's one condition," Amanda said. "Michael needs to be CEO." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Marcus felt his chest compress, felt the old wound, the MIT rejection, the counselor's letter, the pattern of being seen as the lesser twin, rip open. Michael looked uncomfortable. "Amanda, Marcus and I are partners, co-founders. We'd need to discuss. I understand. But markets respond to founders who genuinely care about impact over exits, who build for users, not just acquirers. Michael projects that. You," she turned to Marcus, "you project something else." They had 3 days to decide. In the studio that night, Michael tried to talk it through. "We can negotiate, co-CEOs, or I'll be CEO in name only, and you run operations." "Take it," Marcus interrupted. "What?" "Take the CEO role, take the funding, build the company you want to build." "Marcus, I won't do it if you—" "I said take it." Michael searched his twin's face for the anger he knew must be there. But Marcus's expression was smooth, unreadable, the same mask he'd perfected over years of pitches and rejections. What Michael couldn't see was the decision Marcus had already made. He would learn everything he could from this company, these investors, this ecosystem. And then he would build something so massive that no one would ever question who the real visionary was. Venture Sync would be his education. The next company would be his empire. They shook on it like business partners, not brothers. The distance between them, already measured in philosophies, now stretched into something formal, structural, irreversible. Venture Sync exploded. Within 18 months, they'd raised a $47 million Series B, led by Andreessen Horowitz. They had 340 enterprise customers. Michael was featured in Forbes, 30 under 30. Marcus ran operations with ruthless efficiency, scaling the team to 127 employees. But Marcus was quietly building something else. Late nights after Michael left the office, Marcus would stay behind, studying their data. He'd noticed an anomaly. Their enterprise customers were using Venture Sync not just for startup evaluation, but for secondary market transactions, buying and selling shares in private companies. The secondary market for private equity was fragmented, opaque, inefficient. Brokers charged egregious fees. Pricing was arbitrary. Legal documentation was a nightmare. Marcus saw an opportunity worth billion. He began coding a prototype in secret. He incorporated a separate company under a friend's name. He started recruiting engineers from Venture Sync, promising equity in something that would be bigger than anything we're building here. Michael noticed people leaving, but trusted Marcus's explanation. Some people aren't cut out for scaling. Better to let them go to startups where they'll be happier. The lie came easily now. Michael met Sarah at a human-computer interaction conference in Portland. She was presenting research on ethical AI interfaces. He was giving a keynote about building technology with empathy. They talked for 4 hours straight at the hotel bar. Sarah Bennett was everything Michael valued. Brilliant without arrogance. Passionate about using technology for good. Skeptical of Silicon Valley's growth at all costs mentality. She'd turned down multiple offers from big tech companies to work at a nonprofit building educational software for underprivileged kids. Most founders talk about changing the world, she told Michael. You actually mean it. I can tell. She had no idea she was talking to the wrong twin. 3 months later, Michael brought her to New York, introduced her to the team, to Marcus. Marcus shook her hand and felt nothing. She was attractive, objectively beautiful even, but he registered her primarily as a variable in his brother's life. Someone who would make Michael happy, which meant Michael would be less likely to notice Marcus's increasing absences, his parallel venture, his coming betrayal. Your brother speaks so highly of you, Sarah said warmly, the operational genius behind the throne. Marcus smiled. Michael's the vision. I'm just the execution. But what none of them knew, what couldn't have been predicted, was that in exactly 19 months, Michael would be dead, and Marcus would have to decide whether to tell Sarah the truth or inherit his brother's life entirely. The fuse had been lit. While Michael built Venture Sync into a $400 million revenue company, Marcus built liquid equity in the shadows. The premise was elegant. A marketplace for buying and selling private company shares with transparent pricing, instant settlement, and automated legal documentation. Instead of paying brokers 5 to 8% fees and waiting weeks for transactions to close, shareholders could trade on liquid equity for 0.5% fees and settle within 48 hours. Marcus recruited a team of 12 engineers, all former Venture Sync employees he'd quietly poached. He raised a $3 million angel round from investors who made him sign NDAs. They were also Venture Sync investors and understood the conflict. When are you going to tell Michael? His lead engineer asked 6 months in. When it doesn't matter anymore, Marcus replied. By year 2 of Venture Sync's success, liquid equity had processed 140 million in transactions. Marcus had offers from Tiger Global and Coatue to lead a massive Series A. But first, he needed to extract himself from VentureSync without destroying his relationship with Michael. Or he needed Michael to be so successful that his little brother wouldn't notice the betrayal. The universe chose neither option. March 14th, a Tuesday. Raining in Seattle, where Michael had flown for a partnership meeting with Amazon. The call came at 11:47 p.m. Eastern. Marcus was in his apartment, reviewing term sheets for Liquid Equities Series A. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Is this Marcus Chen? Yes. This is Harborview Medical Center in Seattle. Your brother Michael was in an accident. You need to come now. The world tilted. Marcus was on a red-eye within 90 minutes. Spent the flight in a dissociative fog, memories flickering. Michael at 7, splitting a candy bar perfectly in half. Michael at 14, defending Marcus when neighborhood kids called him a con artist. Michael at 25, believing in VentureSync when no one else would. Michael at 31, dying in a hospital because a drunk driver ran a red light. He arrived at 6:23 a.m. Michael was in the ICU, unconscious, severe internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury. The doctors spoke in probabilities and hedges, but Marcus understood medicine the way he understood cap tables. When the numbers were bad, hope was just another form of denial. Sarah was already there. She'd flown from San Francisco the moment she heard. She was holding Michael's hand, crying silently, her whole body shaking. Marcus stood in the doorway, and for the first time in years, felt something other than calculation. He felt grief, pure and total and suffocating. He's going to make it, Sarah whispered, not to Marcus but to herself. He has to. But Michael didn't make it. At 2:17 p.m., his heart stopped. The doctors tried for 18 minutes to restart it. Sarah screamed. Marcus stood completely still, watching his identical face go slack on the hospital bed, and understood that he was witnessing his own death. When the doctor finally called it, Sarah collapsed. Marcus caught her. She sobbed into his chest, this woman his brother loved, and whispered, "I was going to tell him tonight. I'm pregnant." The words detonated Marcus's world. The funeral was 3 days later. Spring rain in Queens, where they'd grown up. Lin Chen, now 63 and frail, stood between her remaining son and her dead one's casket, her face a mask of incomprehension. "Why Michael?" she kept whispering. Michael was good. Michael was kind. Why not? She didn't finish. Didn't need to. Sarah delivered the eulogy, her voice breaking every few words. She spoke about Michael's gentleness, his vision of technology serving humanity, his belief that business could be both profitable and ethical. Marcus stood in the front row and realized with crystalline clarity. Sarah was in love with a version of Michael that was half real, half projection. She loved the humble founder who chose impact over empire, who worked at a nonprofit before VentureSync, who lived in a modest apartment despite being worth $80 million on paper. That Michael had existed, but so had another Michael, the one who loved the status, who enjoyed being feted as the conscious capitalist, who had slowly been changing, becoming more ambitious, more willing to compromise principles for growth. Sarah loved the first Michael. She was pregnant by the second. At the reception, she found Marcus alone on the brownstone steps where they'd grown up. "I don't know what to do," she said, sitting beside him. "I'm 12 weeks pregnant. We weren't planning it. I hadn't even told my parents yet. And now..." Marcus felt the weight of what he could say, what he could reveal, how different Michael really was from the image she carried, how their whole relationship was built on her seeing what she wanted to see. But he also felt something unexpected. Protectiveness. For Sarah, yes, but also for the child, for Michael's legacy, for the possibility of doing one thing in his life that wasn't calculated. He would have been an incredible father, Sarah said. Would he? Marcus wasn't sure. Michael had been pulling away from Sarah over the past months, spending more time at the office, less time discussing the future they'd supposedly build together. Marcus suspected Michael had been on the verge of ending things when the pregnancy happened, but Michael was dead, and the truth died with him. You're going to be an incredible mother, Marcus said carefully, and that child is going to know how extraordinary Michael was. I'll make sure of it. Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder. You're so much like him, she said. The same face, but also something different in your eyes, something harder, like you've seen things he never had to. If only she knew. I should tell you something, Marcus began, the confession forming, about liquid equity, about the team he'd poached, about the empire he was building while pretending to be the loyal brother. But Sarah interrupted. Michael told me you were the strong one, that you protected him growing up, that he got all the recognition but you did the harder work. He said you were the one who would have survived if they'd grown up poor and alone. Marcus felt his throat close. He said that? Last month, we were talking about what kind of parents we wanted to be. He said he hoped the baby would have your resilience and his empathy. The best of both. The confession died unspoken. What happened next would haunt Marcus forever. 2 weeks after the funeral, Sarah called Marcus. I'm trying to understand Michael's finances for the baby. There are lawyers asking questions about his equity in VentureSync, his vesting schedule, estate planning. I don't even know where to start. I'll help, Marcus said immediately. Whatever you need. He spent 3 days organizing Michael's affairs. The equity was worth approximately $82 million, fully vested. There was a $2 million life insurance policy. No estate planning beyond a basic will that left everything to my future children and their mother. Sarah was set financially. The baby would never want for anything. But money wasn't what she was grieving. I miss talking to him, she said one evening, sitting in Marcus's apartment as they sorted through documents. He was the only person who understood how I think, who made me feel less alone. Marcus looked at her, really looked, for the first time since Michael's death. Saw the exhaustion beneath her grief, the fear beneath her composure, the loneliness that motherhood without partnership would bring, and he made a choice that would define everything that followed. I'm here, he said quietly, for as long as you need. Sarah's eyes met his. Something passed between them, recognition of shared loss, or perhaps the beginning of something more dangerous. You look so much like him, she whispered. Sometimes I forget you're not. She didn't finish, stood abruptly, grabbing her bag. I should go. I'm sorry. That was inappropriate. Sarah, he caught her arm gently. You're grieving. There's no inappropriate. Whatever you need, space, help, someone to talk to, I'm here. She nodded, tears streaming. Then she was gone. Marcus sat in the silence, understanding he'd just crossed a threshold. Not into deception yet, but onto its border. One more step, and he'd be in territory he couldn't retreat from. The question was whether he'd take that step. 3 months after Michael's death, Marcus couldn't delay anymore. Liquid Equities Series A was closing, $85 million, $425 million valuation. The story would leak. Tech press would connect dots. Sarah would find out from TechCrunch instead of from him. He called her to meet for coffee, prepared a speech about timing, opportunities, separate ventures. She arrived hollow-eyed. The pregnancy was showing now, a small curve beneath her sweater. She'd been consulting for nonprofits, trying to maintain normalcy, but grief clung to her like a second skin. I need to tell you something, Marcus began. I already know, Sarah interrupted, about your company. Liquid Equity. Marcus froze. How? One of Michael's former employees reached out. Said I should know you'd been building a competitor while working at Venture Sync, that you'd poached their team, that Michael never knew. The words hit like physical blows. Sarah, it's not... Did you tell Michael? Her voice was ice. Before he died, did he know? No. Were you planning to? Eventually, when it didn't matter, when you'd already won? She stood, trembling. Michael worshipped you, defended you when investors questioned your ethics, and you were sabotaging him. I wasn't sabotaging. What would you call it? Marcus had no answer that wouldn't sound like exactly what it was. Betrayal. Sarah gathered her things. I don't want your help with Michael's estate. I don't want you around the baby. You're nothing like him. He was good, and you're... I'm what? Marcus heard himself ask, voice hollow. Sarah looked at him with something worse than hatred. Pity. You're alone, she said. And you always will be. She left. Marcus sat in the coffee shop for 2 hours, staring at nothing, understanding he'd finally achieved what he'd spent his whole life working toward, becoming completely separate from his twin. Winning felt exactly like dying. Liquid Equity's Series A closed. Marcus appeared on the cover of Forbes with the headline, "The Other Chen Twins' Quiet Triumph." The article detailed his ruthless efficiency, his ability to spot market gaps, his willingness to compete against his own brother. The tech community was split. Half admired his competitive fire. Half called him a betrayer who'd built his empire on fratricide. Marcus felt nothing reading either perspective. He threw himself into scaling Liquid Equity. They grew from $140 million in transaction volume to $2.3 billion within 8 months. Tiger Global led a $200 million Series B at a $2.1 billion valuation. Marcus owned 34%, making him a paper billionaire at 32. His mother refused his calls. His few friends from the early days stopped reaching out. He dated occasionally, but never seriously. Women were attracted to the wealth, repelled by the emptiness they sensed beneath. Sarah had the baby, a boy, named Michael Chen Bennett. Marcus learned this from Instagram. Sarah had made her account private, but mutual friends posted pictures. A tiny face with Michael's exact nose, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Marcus stared at the photo for hours. His nephew, his brother's son. A child who would grow up hearing stories about his father's kindness and his uncle's cruelty. He sent a gift, a trust fund, with $10 million of. Sarah returned it with a note. Blood money. That night, Marcus got drunk for the first time since college. Called Michael's voicemail just to hear his brother's voice on the outgoing message. Wept in a way he hadn't since he was 14, watching his mother's bleeding lip, making the promise that had destroyed them all. Nobody will ever hurt you because you're poor. He'd kept that promise. His mother would never be poor again. But she'd lost a son, and Marcus had lost everyone. The letter arrived on what would have been the twins' 33rd birthday. Marcus found it slipped under his apartment door. His mother must have come in person rather than mail it. The envelope simply said, Marcus, in her shaky handwriting. Inside, my son. For 33 years, I had 2 sons. Now I have none. Michael died in Seattle. You died the day you chose winning over your brother. Do you remember when you were 7, before your father left? You and Michael made a promise. You held hands and swore you would always protect each other, that no amount of money or success would matter more than being brothers. Michael kept that promise. Every day of his life he kept it. He turned down opportunities because he didn't want to compete with you. He told me once that watching you struggle hurt more than his own failures. You broke that promise years before he died. Maybe when you were 14 and walked out. Maybe when you started Liquid Equity in secret. maybe earlier, when you decided the world had room for only one of you. I don't know if you can feel anymore, Marcus, but I need you to understand something. Sarah was wrong. You're not alone because you're cruel. You're cruel because you're terrified of being alone. Michael had a son, your nephew. He will never know his father. But he could know his uncle, if that uncle existed anymore. I'm giving you a choice Michael never got. You can keep winning, or you can come home. But you cannot do both. Your mother, Lynn Marcus, read the letter 17 times. Then he made a decision that would change everything. Marcus showed up at Sarah's apartment unannounced on a Sunday morning. She opened the door with baby Michael on her hip, her expression shifting from shock to anger in less than a second. "You can't be here," she said, moving to close the door. "I need to tell you the truth," Marcus said. "About Michael, about me, about everything. I know enough truth about you. You don't. And he deserves to know. His father wasn't who you think." Sarah hesitated. The baby, 8 months old now, with Michael's eyes and Sarah's chin, reached toward Marcus with chubby fingers, gurgling happily. "You have 5 minutes," Sarah said. Marcus told her everything. About the MIT rejection and the ethical concerns. About Michael's growing ambition that contradicted his public persona. About VentureSync's increasingly aggressive competitive tactics that Michael had approved. About the conversation they'd had 2 months before the accident, where Michael admitted he was tired of being the good guy who finishes second. "You're lying," Sarah said, but her voice wavered. "I'm not. Michael was good, but he wasn't perfect. He was changing, becoming more like me, and he hated himself for it. That's why he pulled away from you those last months. He was afraid he'd become someone you couldn't love." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're raising his son to worship a myth. And when that boy becomes a man, he'll feel like he can never measure up to his father's perfection. I know because I spent my whole life trying to be different from Michael, and it destroyed us both." "What do you want, Marcus?" He looked at his nephew, who was now trying to grab Marcus's watch with absolute determination. "I want to tell you about my brother, the real one, the one who code binged on Red Bull and fell asleep with his keyboard imprinted on his face, who cried at Pixar movies, who broke up with his high school girlfriend because she made fun of a kid with autism, who called me at 2 a.m. when he got the Sequoia term sheet, because even though he was CEO, he wanted me to be the first to know." Sarah was crying openly now. "I want to tell you about the time Michael spent his entire paycheck from his first internship buying me a laptop because mine had broken and I couldn't afford to replace it. About how he turned down Google not just for VentureSync, but because he knew I needed him and wouldn't ask." Marcus's voice broke. "I want your son to know his father was human, complicated, flawed, real, and that his uncle is the same, and that maybe—" He couldn't finish. Sarah wiped her eyes, set the baby down in his playpen, turned back to Marcus with an expression he couldn't read. Maybe what? Maybe love doesn't require perfection. Maybe family is about showing up, even when you're broken. Sarah studied him for a long moment. Then, "He has your eyes. He has Michael's eyes." "Same eyes," she said quietly. "That's the problem. I look at you and see him and hate you for being alive when he's not. That's not fair, but it's true. I know. And I don't trust you. Your mother doesn't trust you. Everyone who knows what you did thinks you're ruthless and calculating and incapable of putting anyone before yourself." "They're right," Marcus said. "I am all those things." "Then why should I let you anywhere near Michael's son?" Marcus looked at his nephew, who was now enthusiastically destroying a board book, and felt something he hadn't experienced since his brother's death. Purpose beyond profit. "Because ruthless and calculating means I'll make sure nothing ever hurts him. Because putting myself first means I'll model how to set boundaries and protect what matters. Because I'm alive, and Michael isn't. And that baby deserves to know where he comes from. He paused. And because I loved my brother. Not well enough. Not before it was too late. But more than I've loved anything in my life. And maybe the only way to honor that is to love his son the way I should have loved him. The silence stretched. Then Sarah said, Sundays. 2 p.m. Supervised visits. You miss one, you're done. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. And Marcus? Sarah's voice was steel. If you ever lie to me again, if you ever put your companies before this child, if you ever make me regret this, you'll cut me out. I understand. No, Sarah said. I'll make sure he knows exactly who his uncle is. All of it. The good and the terrible. No myths, no protection. Just truth. Marcus extended his hand. Sarah shook it. They stood there, two people bound by love for a dead man, beginning the hard work of building something real from the ruins. The first Sunday, Marcus showed up at 1:47 p.m. with age-appropriate toys he'd researched for 6 hours. Baby Michael took one look at him and cried. The second Sunday, Marcus read board books in different voices until the baby fell asleep on his chest. Sarah took a picture, didn't send it to him, but didn't delete it either. By the 8th Sunday, baby Michael reached for Marcus the moment he walked in. Sarah's expression was less guarded. They talked while the baby played. Real conversation about Sarah's work, Marcus's company, the impossible logistics of single motherhood. I'm angry at him, Sarah admitted one afternoon. At Michael, for dying, for leaving me alone with this. That makes me horrible. It makes you human. You would have left me too, she said. Not accusatory, just observing. Yes, Marcus agreed. The person I was would have. I'm trying to be someone different. Why? Because dying alone and rich sounds worse than living connected and complicated. Sarah almost smiled. That's the most honest thing you've ever said. Slowly, over months, a strange intimacy developed. Not romantic. Too much grief and baggage for that. But something deeper. Two people who'd loved the same person learning to tolerate each other's presence while raising his child. Marcus cut his work hours from 80 to 50 per week, started leaving his phone in the other room during Sunday visits, learned to change diapers, decode toddler tantrums, sing nursery rhymes without self-consciousness. Liquid Equity went public when Marcus was 34. IPO valued the company at $8.7 billion. Marcus's stake was worth $2.3 billion. The press asked what he'd do with the wealth. Family, he said, and refused to elaborate. On baby Michael's 2nd birthday, Sarah invited Marcus to the party. Real invitation, not just his standing Sunday slot. Other friends would be there. Kids from music class. Sarah's parents. Marcus arrived with an absurdly large stuffed elephant and immediately felt out of place among the casually friendly parents who'd built genuine community while he'd built companies. But little Michael ran straight to him. Unka Mar! Unka Mar! Look, effluent! The boy was speaking now, calling him uncle, looking at him with uncomplicated joy. Marcus felt something in his chest crack open. After the party, after the guests left, and the toddler crashed into sugar coma sleep, Sarah poured 2 glasses of wine and joined Marcus on the balcony. I need to tell you something, she said. Marcus braced for impact. This was where she'd say the visits were ending, that she'd met someone, that he'd served his purpose. Michael knew about Liquid Equity. The words took several seconds to process. What? He knew. Found out about 4 months before the accident. One of your engineers got drunk at a conference and mentioned it. Michael confronted them, got the whole story. Marcus felt reality tilt. He never said anything. He was going to. Planned to have it out with you after the Amazon meeting. He was furious, Marcus. Not just about the company, but about the lying. He'd written you a letter. I found it in his apartment after he died. Never sent it. She pulled out her phone, showed him a photo of Michael's handwriting. Marcus, I know about LE. I know about the team you poached. I know about the secret funding. I'm angrier than I've ever been. But also, not surprised. This is who you've always been. The one who wins at any cost. Here's what you don't understand. I don't want to beat you. I never did. I just wanted you to be my brother. After the Amazon deal closes, we're having this out. Either you come clean and we figure out how to fix this, or we're done. Not as co-founders. As family. Choose wisely. We only get one shot at this. Marcus read it 3 times, vision blurring. Why are you showing me this now? He asked. Because you've spent 2 years thinking Michael died, believing the best of you. That you got away with it. That your betrayal was never discovered. She turned to face him fully. But Michael knew who you were, Marcus. All of it. The lying, the competing, the ruthlessness. And you know what his last text to me was? The night before the accident. Marcus shook his head, unable to speak. Sarah pulled up the message. Tomorrow I'm going to save my brother from himself. Even if he doesn't want to be saved. Because that's what family does. He was coming to confront you. To force you to choose between winning and your relationship. And he died believing you'd choose him. That underneath all your calculating bullshit, you loved him more than you loved success. Sarah's eyes were dry but fierce. Did he die believing the truth? Or a lie? Marcus looked at her, at the apartment paid for with his brother's life insurance, at the door behind which his nephew slept, at the impossible question that had no clean answer. I don't know, he said finally. I wanted to choose him. I planned to come clean after Liquid Equity's Series B. I told myself I'd fix everything. But I don't know if I actually would have. At least that's honest. They sat in silence, the city glittering below them. 2 people trying to build something true from the wreckage of secrets. I miss him every day, Sarah said quietly. The real him. Not the myth I built. Not the perfect father I told our son about. The man who forgot my birthday, who got defensive when I questioned Venture Sync's hiring practices, who sometimes chose work over us. She smiled sadly. I miss the human being, and I think you do too. Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice. So here's what we do, Sarah continued. We tell Michael, our Michael, the truth about his father, about you, about the mess that families actually are. We raise him to be better than both of you, without pretending either of you were saints. What if I screw it up? Marcus asked. What if I'm too damaged to help raise him? You definitely will screw it up, Sarah said, and you definitely are too damaged. But you're showing up anyway. That's what Michael needed from you and never got. Don't make the same mistake twice. She stood, collected the wine glasses. Same time next Sunday? Same time, Marcus confirmed. As he walked to his car that night, Marcus pulled out his phone and looked at the photo he'd never deleted. Michael and him at 7 years old, gap-toothed and identical, arms around each other, grinning at a future they thought they'd face together. He'd spent his whole life trying to be different from his twin. Turns out the only thing that mattered was being present. Marcus Chen's Wikipedia page lists his net worth at $4.1 billion. Liquid Equity processes over $340 billion in private equity transactions annually. He's on the Forbes 400. His apartment is profiled in Architectural Digest. None of that matters on Sunday afternoons. What matters is that Michael Chen Bennett, now 7 years old, beats him at chess while explaining the Sicilian defense with unsettling precision. What matters is that the boy has Michael's kindness and Marcus's strategic mind, and hasn't yet learned he can't have both. What matters is that Sarah finally let Marcus help when her nonprofit expanded to 3 countries, and he restructured their cap table without taking any equity. And she cried and said, "Michael would have loved this version of you." What matters is that Lin Chen calls him my son again, and they have dim sum every other Saturday, and she tells him stories about the twins as babies that make him understand what he almost lost forever. What matters is that he endowed the Michael Chen Fellowship at MIT, full-ride scholarships for students who demonstrate both technical excellence and genuine empathy, the combination his brother embodied. But the thing that matters most happens on a random Tuesday evening. Little Michael is doing homework at Marcus's apartment, and he looks up suddenly and asks, "Uncle Marcus, did you and Daddy love each other?" Marcus puts down his laptop, gives the question the weight it deserves. "Your daddy loved me more than I deserved," he says carefully. "And I loved him less than I should have. That's the truth. Mom says you're trying to be better. I am. Every day." The boy thinks about this then. "I think Daddy would like that you're trying." Marcus feels his throat close. "I think he would too. I wish I could have met him." "Me too, buddy. Me too." They sit in comfortable silence, the man who chose empire over brotherhood, and the boy who'll never know his father, finding something like peace in their shared loss. Late at night, when the deals are done and the Sundays are over, and the empire runs itself, Marcus sometimes stands at his floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan and asks himself the question that has no answer. If Michael had lived, if they'd had the confrontation his brother planned, would Marcus have chosen differently? Would he have merged the companies, admitted his betrayal, rebuilt their relationship at the cost of his competitive edge? Or would he have done what he'd always done, calculated the optimal outcome, minimized his vulnerability, chosen winning over connection? He wants to believe he would have chosen Michael, wants to think the brother who died believing in his redemption was right. But Marcus built his fortune on ruthless honesty about human nature, and human nature doesn't change just because you want it to. The truth is simpler and more painful. Michael's death was the only thing powerful enough to crack Marcus open. Without that loss, he might have conquered the entire tech ecosystem and ended up completely alone. Which raises a darker question. Did he need his brother to die to learn how to be human? The answer terrifies him, because if yes, then everything he's built since, the relationship with Sarah, the love for his nephew, the reconciliation with his mother, is constructed on the foundation of Michael's sacrifice. And if no, then Michael died, believing in a version of Marcus that never actually existed. Either way, his brother paid the price for his education. Marcus touches the window glass, sees his reflection, Michael's reflection, and wonders if the man staring back is the ruthless founder who won Silicon Valley or the devoted uncle who shows up every Sunday. Then, little Michael's latest drawing catches his eye, the boy's version of family. Stick figure mom, stick figure daddy in heaven, stick figure Uncle Marcus, all holding hands in a chain that refuses to break. In the drawing, Uncle Marcus is smiling. Marcus doesn't know if he's earned that smile, doesn't know if he's genuinely changed or just learned to perform empathy like he performs every other valuable trait. But he knows this. Next Sunday at 2 p.m., he'll show up, and the Sunday after that, and every Sunday after, for as long as his nephew will have him. It's not redemption. Redemption would require Michael's forgiveness, and Michael is gone. But it's presence, consistency, the kind of love that doesn't require perfection, just showing up, broken and trying. Maybe that's enough. Or maybe it's just what Marcus tells himself to live with the cost of being the twin who survived. The city glitters below. The empire hums. The child sleeps peacefully across town. And Marcus Chen, billionaire, betrayer, uncle, brother, stands in the dark and carries the weight of two lives, the one he lived and the one Michael never got to finish. Some debts can never be repaid, but they can be honored, one Sunday at a time.